Welcome to Retail's Most Wanted, the podcast that examines the latest issues related to organized retail crime and how retailers and policymakers are fighting back against today's organized crime syndicates. I'm your host, Marty Carpenter, and coming up on today's show, we'll examine the mindset and the tactics of ORC groups so the good guys can develop effective prevention strategies. Our guest is Cory Lowe of the Loss Prevention Research Council at the University of Florida. He specializes in criminological theory, crime prevention, and research methods, and has published multiple peer-reviewed articles and presented his research at various conferences. He holds a PhD in criminology, law, and society from the University of Florida and serves as the director of research at the LPRC. That's coming up next, right after these messages. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with the Attorney General Alliance, where U.S. state attorneys general collaborate on emerging legal issues and the rule of law at home and across borders. Learn more at agalliance.com. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with LVT, securing physical environments through intelligent automation. Learn more at lvt.com. That's lvt.com. Hey, let's start here. Let's just let our audience have a chance to get to know you and your organization a little bit. Tell us about your role at the Loss Prevention Research Council and your background and how you got involved in fighting against organized retail crime in the first place.
Good deal. So I am the Director of Research at the Loss Prevention Research Council. I lead the research team. We have grown to about a 20-member team. That's not just research. We have about 12 on the research team, I guess, now. And then several interns and things like that. But I oversee pretty much all of the projects that are going on in one way or another, working with the team to make sure that those projects are moving along and that they're all just working out the way they're supposed to. Also driving what we're actually focused on. When that's a possibility, we really try to defer to what the retailers want whenever we can. So it's just making sure that all of that's moving the way it's supposed to move.
You mentioned moving some projects along. Can you give us just an idea of like what kind of project, not to divulge any confidential information, but when you say working on projects, what kind of stuff is that?
So a great example, we did the Access Task Force with LVT last year, where 49 LVT units were deployed to two cities, Opelika and Paducah, Opelika, Alabama, Paducah, Kentucky. And we were looking at what is the effect on crime at the macro level in these cities. And so our team did the analysis on a 400-person survey and then a geospatial analysis of what happened to crime in the areas where the units were deployed. So that's the type of research that we're doing. There's really three legs to the LPRC stool. There's basic research, applied research, and education. Those are kind of our three key objectives. Basic research is going out and understanding what are the trends, what does the risk landscape look like, all of that. What is current practice, the benchmarking studies, things like that. The applied research is trying to understand what works. So if my goal as an asset protection professional is to protect vulnerable people, places, and property, what actually works to make that happen. And that could be strategies, tactics, solutions across the board. We want to understand what that is. And then finally, we have to educate the industry. So we engage in a lot of different educational opportunities where we're sharing our findings to members. So we do presentations at conferences. We have our own conference each year. October 7th to the 9th is our impact show this year. But we're always trying to share our research with the public. We also have working groups and other groups that we have within the organization where we're constantly sharing findings from the research.
Yeah. So you're in the business of like figuring out what's going on and how criminals. Let me try that again. You're in the business of figuring out how criminals are going about trying to steal from retail operations. I'm going to ask you a really broad question, and I want you to figure out what, from your expertise, what's the best way to kind of hone in and give me the best response you can. What's the best advice that you give to retailers who say, we're losing a lot here and we need to have a fresh look at our loss prevention strategy?
Yes. So the best advice that I can give is to spend some time understanding your problem first. And once you begin to understand that problem, ensure that you are hitting all of the relevant pieces in your program across what we like to call the 5 zones of influence. So we have these 5 zones of influence that we like to use at the LPRC. Zone 1 is the precise location of a target. That could be a person, piece of merchandise, cash, whatever. It's the target of an offender. That target is often situated in a general category area. So if it's cash, it might be the cash office. If it's a container of Tide, it's on the shelf in the fabric carrier area. Then you have Zone 2, that's that general category area nested within Zone 3, which is the overall store interior and the entry and exit points. Zone 4 is the parking lot and store curtilage, and then Zone 5 is everything beyond the parking lot and the cyber domain. If you know that you have a problem, you need to spend some time doing problem analysis, understanding the causes of those problems, and then targeting the causal factors or the processes involved. We like to talk about crime scripts at the LPRC. Everyone's familiar with the shopper's journey, right? So a shopper, long before they show up at your store, you want to be sending them messages, buy this, right? This is on sale, come shop at our store, all of that. Out in the community, you want to be sending signals. You have to do the same thing with offenders. You want to be sending deterrents to them when they're out in the community before they even get to you. Same thing with shoppers. When they get to your parking lot, you want to be hitting them with messages to buy, what you're selling. With offenders, you want to be sending the message that this is not the place to commit crime. So you want that impression of control in the parking lot. You want to have security in the parking lot, sending that message. You do not want to be here and commit a crime. That's the red guest.
Yeah. What are those signals? Like, what would you send outside of the store to say, like, hey, this is not a place to mess with? Where it can also, let's start with that question. How do you send those signals? Like, what are the things that would flag that?
The probably one of the most important things is just having that impression. We can call it impression of control, and sometimes that's a mysterious term that people throw around without thinking about it. But the impression of control is giving people the impression that things are under control, that someone cares enough to take care of a place. That means that someone's probably watching what I'm doing. Someone cares enough to take care of this place. If I do something in this area, someone's going to notice something's out of order, and that's going to increase the likelihood of if I commit a crime, that something negative is going to happen to me. Yeah. Right? I'm more likely to suffer some negative consequence because I committed the crime. So starting with that impression of control is important. That includes doing the basics, like making sure that everything is orderly, but then also putting security measures in place, whether that's signage, mobile protective units, LPRs, whatever that might be out in the parking lot, that might be an overt deterrent. Of course, there's a role for investigative tools and things out in the parking lot, but those overt deterrents will be what are most important from a prevention standpoint there. That would be Zone 4. Right.
So it's not necessarily like, there's clearly cameras or there's clearly like bars on windows. It's almost the opposite. You say it just looks well kept. It makes me think of like when New York was kind of run down in the 90s, and then Mayor Giuliani said, hey, if graffiti goes up, it gets taken down within 24 hours, right? A broken window gets fixed within 24 hours, so people know you're watching. It's almost like a subliminal thing more than like a sign that says caution, you're being watched. But I suppose it could be both.
It is both. So, like the broken windows, that was the broken windows policing model. If you think about that, there's nothing magical happening there, right? Cleaning up the subway cars doesn't magically make people not want to commit crime. There's a causal model there. And the article that Kelling and Wilson Kelling put out there, in some ways left it a little bit mysterious to some people. Ultimately, it's about impression of control. There's someone there that cares enough. And that means that it's more likely that someone is going to do something, they're going to intervene if I commit a crime, right? Sometimes people talk about it and it's just kind of this mysterious, we're fixing things to create an impression of control without really identifying what the logic model is.
You have large retailers, I imagine, who come and want you guys to study and figure out essentially, hey, we're losing a lot to theft,
Yeah.
whether it's organized retail crime or theft in some way. They've got a lot of shrinkage because of that. But they also probably are saying, but the solution can't be so onerous that it drives away the customers who are actually paying for products. So what's your research led you to as far as like, what's the right balance there? Like, I know you hear people talk about, well, if you just lock products up and then I got to get someone to come get the razors out for me, it just gets easier for me to go order them online, right?
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance? Where are you kind of settling in?
So, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What is retail's business?
Selling products.
Selling stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So at the LPRC, we like to talk about two categories, the red guest and the green guest.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, our job is to make sure that retailers are selling stuff, right? That's the green guest. We want to satisfy the green place user. You can call them place users, you can call them guests. But
that's me, a guy who goes in and I'm not here to
Exactly.
steal something. I just want to buy it, pay for it, and get out the door.
you want to buy it, you want to pay for it. There's also your managers, your workers, your window shoppers, all these people who are using your place for legitimate purposes.
Sure.
Right? That's the green guest or the green place user. The red place user is the person who's there to kill, steal, destroy, defraud, all of those things that we don't want happening in the environment. Yeah. So we have to constantly balance the needs of those two groups. The problem is that one of the best tools in the LP toolbox is to create friction. Right. So friction in the form of locking cases. If I increase the effort required to commit a crime, that's target hardening. It's going to be effective.
Yeah.
It's also going to be effective at shutting down sales. Unfortunately,
hurts the red and hurts the green. In that sense.
Exactly. It's not. So I like to talk about it in terms of friction efficiency. Right. It's an inefficient use of friction because it's hitting everyone instead of just the people that you're trying to influence. Mm-hmm. So the balance always has to be, okay, how can I target the friction? How can I focus my efforts on the individuals who are, red guests? That means I need to choose solutions and strategies that will, not really matter to the green guest, but will have a major impact on the red guest. Mm-hmm. And that takes a little bit more thought and an effort to devise than a lot of the heavy-handed solutions that are out in the industry today.
Yeah. I'm just speaking as a consumer, right? I've noticed that there are some stores that everyone's sort of rushed to have self-checkout, and then now some places are going away from self-checkout. Is that not enough of a friction point? Is essentially what they've decided, that not everyone's stopping to pay, or they're paying for 80% of what's in their bag as they leave?
Yeah. I think that's the case. I think there's a lot of challenges there. Do I think that self-checkout is not here to stay? I think it is going to be a fixture of retail for the foreseeable future, but how it's done is going to be different. There is insufficient risk to offenders who do things at self-checkout. And there's insufficient effort needed to commit a crime. What I mean by that, and I didn't really define my terms earlier, but when we talk about preventing crimes from a rational choice perspective, we use the principles of situational crime prevention, which is you can, to prevent a crime, to deter a crime, you can increase the effort required to commit a crime. It's cost benefit. So the costs are effort and risk, criminal risk. Mm-hmm. The risk that something negative will happen to me, plus the time and effort. The benefit is whatever the benefit of the crime is. It may be, it could be something like the monetary value of stolen merchandise, but it could also be, vengeance, mm-hmm. Or a retaliation for some slight or perceived slight, right? It could be all of those things. It's satisfying some desire. At self-checkout, there is obviously a huge payoff to people who want to commit an offense there, but then there's also not enough criminal risk or effort required to offend. On the criminal risk side, if someone is, going through and they don't ring up something, the customer service associate's going to come up to them and say, "Oh, I think you forgot to scan that," because they want to be non-confrontational. They want to address the problem while being non-confrontational. Well, everyone that is committing those crimes knows. Well, they're going to assume that I'm just made a mistake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a challenge that you have to deal with, and that's why I think that there's some technologies out there. If you want to scale self-checkout, you're going to have to either put enough people there and to monitor the systems, and then you're back in the.
You might as well have a cashier at that point.
Exactly, or you need to find some solution that will allow you to efficiently monitor what's being scanned.
Yeah.
And so I think those technologies are out there, and I think there's a suite of technologies that could play a role in that. But yeah, that's my perspective.
Well, I'll give you a free bit of data research here, a free test subject. I don't mind scanning my own stuff at the grocery store. I just hate when I scan it and put it in the cart, and it yells at me for not putting it in a bag, but it's something that's too big for the bag. And I say, hey, now I'll use this terminology. I'm a green customer. Yeah. I'm just trying to get out of here. If you're going to make me work here too, then sometimes you might just have to realize maybe one thing gets lost in the shuffle. I don't know. I'm never trying to steal anything, but I just don't like the hassle of being labeled kind of a potential red threat when I'm clearly just a green guy.
Yeah. Well, the thing, like I said, I'm not going to be accused of anything. And they're going to come up and say, I think you missed that.
Yeah.
And that's the worst that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Unless you're a repeat offender and you're known to the organization and they have an effective team.
Yeah.
Then there might be some intervention.
Yeah. Where do you think we are? You research this and try to figure out the best ways to go. Where do you think we are in like 5 years? Does the shopping experience feel a lot like it does now? Is it going to get sort of more on the lockdown? Does technology improve in a way where, like in 5 years, are we where, hey, I just walk around and put stuff in my basket and it checks me out as I walk out the store? It'd be interesting it'd be interested in your thoughts on where we are in 5 or 10 years.
I try not to make predictions. Okay. If I could make predictions that far ahead, I would be a very wealthy man in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, from where we are today, if you went and looked backwards then 5 years, what surprised you to say, oh, we got to this point? I wouldn't have seen that coming 5 or 10 years ago.
COVID, that was a surprise.
that did catch a few people.
Massive social unrest and all of that. There's a lot of things that happened in the past 5 years that really were surprising.
Yeah.
So predictions, I just don't make them.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the safe place to be.
Yeah.
Is there anything I wasn't smart enough to ask you about in the last 10, 15 minutes that I should have asked you?
I think it's just a restriction of time. I think I could sit here and talk to you about this stuff for an indefinite amount of time. Yeah.
Well, if we kept you any longer, I'd be a red customer of your time, and I want to be a green customer of your time. So I appreciate you taking some time, Cory. Thanks so much, and thanks for all the great work you guys do at the LPRC.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, that's it for this episode of Retail's Most Wanted. Thanks, as always, to our presenting sponsors, LVT and the Attorney General Alliance. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button so you can catch each new episode. We drop a new one every 2 weeks. We're also on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Links for all of that are in the show notes below. Thanks for being with us, everyone, and as always, keep up the good fight.